Shabbat Shalom, family. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. The name is Mecca. I'm here today to edify the lost 12 tribes scattered throughout the diaspora, as it pertains to the elect through the sanctification and the foreknowledge of our Messiah in Paleo Hebrew, which his name is Yahweh Shai HaMashiach. With that being said, the introductory statements I have will start with Psalm 68, verse 11. The Lord gave the word, great was the company of those that published it. And in 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 20-21 reads, knowing this first, that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation, for the prophecy came not in the old time by the will of man, but holy men of God spake as they were moved by the Holy Ghost. The topic at hand goes into Israelites wrote the Bible. The heathen just stole it like they do all. My opening statements that I found, according to a 2011 BBC newsletter, states the Old Testament is the original Hebrew Bible, the sacred scriptures of the Jewish faith, written at different times between 1200 and 165 BC. The New Testament books were written by Christians, aka Israelites, in the 1st century AD. So I'm going to be attempting to display how the Israelites throughout the Bible, from the Old Testament all the way to the New Testament, including the Apocrypha, were archiving sacred documents through, the recording and the writing of them. So in the Old Testament, Exodus chapter 24, verse 4 reads, and Moses wrote all the words of the Lord and rose up early in the morning and built an altar under the hill and 12 pillars according to the 12 tribes of Israel. Exodus chapter 31, verse 18 reads, and he gave unto Moses, when he made an end of communing with him upon Mount Sinai, 2 tables of testimony, tables of stone, written with the fingers of Yahweh. In the Tanakh, 1 King chapter 4-3 reads, Elihorpha and Ahiah, the sons of Shishia, the scribes are the people who wrote, in Jehoshaphat, the sons of Ahilud, the recorder. So Ahilud is the recorder, right? Just like I alluded earlier, scribes, people who archive things. In 2 Chronicles chapter 34 and 13, it says, also they were over the bearers and the burdens, and were overseers of all that wrought the work in the manner of service. And the Levites, there were scribes, officers, and porters. Okay? In the Apocrypha, which is the interconnection part of the Bible, it starts from the end of Malachi all the way to the beginning of Matthew, okay? The missing 15 books that the Protestant Edomite church took out on purpose, deliberately. So 2 Maccabees chapter 2, verse 13-15 says, the same thing also were reported in the writings and the commentaries of Nehemiah, and how he founded a library, gathered together the Acts of the Kings and the Prophets, and of David, and the epistles of the kings concerning the holy gifts. In like manner also Judas gathered together all those things that were lost by reason of the war we had, and they remain with us. Wherefore, if you have need, therefore, send some to fetch them unto you. In the New Testament, Matthew chapter 23-2 reads in the red letters, saying, the scribes, like we read earlier in the Old Testament, and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seats. So Christ is telling the masses that the scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. Moses was given the law directly from Yahweh. In Mark chapter 1, verse 22 reads, and they were astonished at his doctrine, for he taught them as one that had authority, and not as the scribes. So Christ here, Mark is portraying how, zealous he was when giving his sermons, right? So captivating. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 13 reads, the cloak that I left at Taurus with Capras, when thou comest, bring with thee, and the books but especially the parchments. So we're seeing, evidence of the disciples archiving and utilizing the books of the ancients to further, emphasize their word in their teachings. Example of gospel that Christ was teaching, as alluded in Mark chapter 1, verse 22, can be found in Luke chapter 4, verse 17 to 19, which reads, "And there was delivered unto him the book of the prophet Isaiah," which is Isaiah. "And when he had opened the book, he found the place where it was written, The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, recovering of the sight to the blind, and to set at liberty them that are bruised, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord." That's what Christ was being mentioned as being zealous about, right? That's how captivating he was when he spoke, as it pertains to the book of Isaiah. So now we're going to jump into the next segment that describes the supporting academic literature that explains and further justifies how, the Israelites wrote the Bible. Reference 1. Israelites in North Africa pushed the foundation for the gospel in the early 4th century AD. Okay, and this article that I have here is commonly called the Code of the Canons of the African Church. Introductory note: the councils were nowhere more frequently called in the primitive times than in Africa. In the year of 418 to 419, all canons formally made the 16 councils held at Carthage. Carthage is a place in Africa, North Africa. One at Milvis, one at Hippo, that were approved of, were read, and received a new sanction from a great number of bishops. Then met at Synod at Carthage. This collection of the Code of the African Church, which was always the greatest repute in all churches, next after the Code of the Universal Church. This code was very great authority in the Old English churches. For many of the inscriptions of Egbert was transcribed from it. And though the Code of the Universal Church ends with the canon of the Chaldon, yet these African codes are inserted into the ancient code both of the Eastern and Western churches. These canons, through ratified and approved by the Synod, yet seem to have been divided or numbered by some private and unlearned hand, and have probably met with very unskillful transcribers. There we go again, that word transcribers, by which mean some of them are much confounded as to their sense and coherence. They are Dionysius, Exeges, and other entitled the Canons of the Synod of Africa. And though all were not originally made at one time, yet they were all confirmed by one synod of African bishops, who, after they were recited the creed of the 20 canons of the Council of Nicaea, proceed to make a new canons and reinforced old ones. So here, the author is further illustrating that there was a authoritative and precise, collection of work that went into the foundation of the Holy Bible that we read today, right? This is where it all started during the early 4th century, right? This is the beginning of a compilation of God's word. Okay, so the phenotypes of the people in Carthage were also called the Punic people, also known as Carthaginians. They were a Semitic people who migrated from Phoenicia to Western Mediterranean during the early Iron Age. In modern scholarship, the term Punic, the Latin equivalent, and the Greek derived from Phoenicians, is exclusively used to refer to Phoenicians in Western Mediterranean, following the line of the Greek East and Latin West. The largest Punic settlement was ancient Carthage, but there was 300 other settlements along the northern coast from Leptis Magna in modern Libya to Mogador in southern Morocco, as well as the western Sicily, southern Sardinia, the southern and the eastern coast of Iberian Peninsula, Malta, and Ibiza. Their language, Punic, was a dialect of the Phoenicians, one of the northern Semitic languages originating in the Levant. So the author is further, substantiating that the people of the Carthaginians were of Semitic ancestry. Okay, imagery. One of the greatest war minds to live was a black man, and his name was Hannibal Barca. Okay, African general of the Carthage, and he reads, "I will either find a way or make one." Okay, so Hannibal, also known as Hannibal Barca, 247 to 183 BCE, was a Carthaginian general during the Second Punic War between Carthage and Rome. He is considered one of the greatest generals of antiquity, and his tactics are still studied and used in present day. His father was Hamilcar Barca, the great general of the First Punic Wars. These wars were fought between the cities of Carthage in North Africa and Rome in northern Italy for supremacy in the Mediterranean region, and the second war resulted directly from the first. Hannibal assumed command of the troops following his father's death and led them victoriously through a number of engagements until he stood almost at the gates of Rome, at which point he was stopped, not by Romans, but through a lack of resources to take the city. He was called back to Africa to defend Carthage from Rome invasion. Was defeated at the Battle of Zama in 202 BCE by Scipio Africanus. Henceforth, this is where the name Africa comes from, right? Africa, this guy who defeated Hannibal, and retired from service to Carthage. The remainder of his life was spent as a statesman and then voluntarily exiled at the courts of the foreign kings. He died in 183 BCE by drinking poison. So this is a depiction of what Hannibal looked like during that time period, right? As we can see here, the distinct phenotypes of Negroid and African this descendant, right, with the enlarged oral depictions and nasal depiction, as well as the woolly hair, as illustrated in both coins, and we can see the warlike animals that he he accessed throughout his wars, right? He was really known for expertise in the formation of these animals, right, and how to utilize them to his advantage. Next, we have a better image, right, with more color and contrast. His initials and vice versa. Okay, so I have some supporting videos I would like to share to viewers because I think it further corroborates, slide my presentation.
the study of antiquity and the Middle Ages. As always, I am your host, Nick Barksdale, and today we are joined once again by Dr. Rebecca Futo Kennedy. While surfing a bunch of my platforms that I'm present on as the study of antiquity in the Middle Ages, I've noticed a debate spark up again that I've seen off and on since my childhood, and that was whether or not Hannibal Barca was black. And you see arguments about the Phoenician lineages, and people are going to bring up Berbers, but I've noticed this attempt to differentiate North Africa from the rest of it. And when I say from the rest of it, it's attempting to erase the black history of North Africa away to a point as if like they were never up there to begin with already. And so this is my question. Was Hannibal the man who made Rome tremble black?
As with any other question about this, right? First, let's call the thing what it is. This obsession with trying to make sure that this great general Hannibal, the man who makes Rome tremble, is a white man. Is of course the desire is strong, and we go back to Dodge and sort of like the Caesar Alexander Hannibal, right? Because he classifies Hannibal as one of the sort of great generals. We have to claim him, but also I think going back to this tension that I already talked about with the issue of sub-Saharan and what we mean by that sort of classification is this desire also to, for people who lay claim to descents from in North Africa that are anti-black as part of the sort of history of the development of the continent of Africa and the sort of Arab invasion and modern imperialism. There's a strong tendency to want to make sure we separate that. So yes, okay, obviously we have the myth of Dido and the founding of Carthage from Phoenicia. We also have Phoenix, the sort of the initiator of the Phoenicians in North Africa, or even in Ethiopia, right? If we read Heliodorus's novel from the 3rd or 4th century CE, we don't know the exact date. He's got they tell the myth of Andromeda in that, and Andromeda, and of course we have 5th century basis of this. And Phoenix, who's the father of Andromeda, they're white, or they're represented as Phoenician, as not black, but they're in a space that is filled with black people. So, but the crux of the story of Heliodorus is that the king and queen of Ethiopia are black, and they have a daughter though who comes out to have really white skin. She's called white because she's a woman, but she has really pale skin, and so the mother has to hide the birth of this child because she's afraid that people will think that she had the child out of wedlock. But in fact, what happened is, and here you're going to get a little bit of insight into ancient medical theories. There is a medical theory called imprinting, where if in the act of sex you are staring at something, that image can imprint onto the fetus. It's something about how they understood how the eye worked, the nature of how the eye worked. And so in the story, this black Ethiopian king and queen of Ethiopia are procreating, and she stares at a painting on the wall of Andromeda. And so the pale skin of Andromeda imprints on the child. And the whole thing ends up happy, everybody's fine. With mom and dad, it's really neat, but in the meantime, she's kidnapped by pirates and raised by shepherds, and there's true love. It's sort of like the Princess Bride of the ancient world. It's a really great story. But what it tells us, though, is how very common this sort of idea of these mixed identities are in North Africa. That we have these stories that have people who are black and people who are not black interacting all the time. And there's a reality that they could, in fact, be related, and it's not a big deal. This is the world that Hannibal exists in, right? This is the world of the Nubians and the Kushites, of the Ethiopians and the kingdom of Aksum, of West African Ethiopians who are obviously black, of the Garamantes who we don't know what they look like, of the people known as the Berbers, who also, again, this is not an actual ethnic category. It becomes one later because it can connect to sort of linguistic categories, but it's actually up in the air what to be called a Berber actually means. And we have this sort of stew pot of Phoenicians who have settled in these places, but they've integrated and mixed with people who are already there. And as we go back to our Herodotus, right, black Africans are indigenous to North Africa. So we're going to have these mixed populations. Egyptians might have black skin, might be black Africans, and even if their skin tones are slightly different, we would still call them black today. And so is Hannibal black? Again, the question Sardinia and Sicily. If you go to Sicily, the history of Sicily is a sort of highly mixed African, Greek, indigenous, and Italian cultures. Even today, I think they they're still not sure how Italian they are down there in Sicily, which I love about them. Um, but if you this bust that they found in Italy of Hannibal, if you look at the bust, if we're going to say, oh, look at the physical features, he's not white. Um, but what does that mean? Because none of them are white. Is he Phoenician? Is he Berber? Whatever that means. Is he African? He's African. That we can say that with certainty. He is African. What that means beyond that is anybody's guess. But it actually, he's not European. So that was one thing we can actually say for sure. My whole point is, look, it doesn't matter if he's black. We will never know, but it doesn't matter because he could be. But I know what he isn't, and he isn't European, and he isn't German, and he's not Nordic, and he's not Aryan. He's not your people.
So now we're gonna transition into the second witness.
The Upper Nile Valley signals the beginning of the end for the highest civilization the world had known. It utterly, quite literally, changed the complexion of the continent. Now, you're beginning to get a geneticized population that's a whole lot of people misinterpreting as white, with each one of these bathers
There you have it. So now my next reference will be gravitating towards the King James, who he was and what he did. So it reads King James authorized the Holy Bible to be published during 1611. So called black man translate the Bible from Hebrew and Greek to English. King James Bible published at 1611. So this is what he looked like, but on your Google, you're going to see a totally whitewashed picture. So this is what he did. In 1604, a total of 47 of England's foremost Bible scholars and linguistics, 47 of the best Hebrew and Greek scholars were chosen to serve on 6 panels. 2 of them met at Oxford, 2 at Cambridge, and 2 at Westminster. Each panel was assigned a particular book of the Bible to translate, 3 for the Old Testament, 2 for the New Testament, and 1 for the Apocrypha. Oh, I thought why is the Apocrypha not in your Bible? I wonder why. Once each of the group had made its translation, the works was reviewed by a committee of 12. Ooh, I wonder why too. That's kind of, you know, coincidence. Made up of 2 scholars from each of the 6 panels. So this is what happened during the time of Europe under King James rule. So it reads the decline of the influence of the Moors in Europe. The Crusades, so-called Caucasian people, would ultimately lead to the decline of the influence of the Moors in Europe. By the 13th century, which is like, I think, 1400 AD or 1300 AD, the Crusaders, the Caucasians, began winning pockets of control in territories of the Moors in Europe, all the way to Spain, primarily because the Moors were engaged in internal fighting over control of the Islamic Caliphate. So this is during around the time frame of like 1300. I want to say the Moors got in there like 800 AD all the way up to like 1300 AD. As a result, the Moorish control gradually declined as Europeans continued to gain stronghold among the divided Moors. In 1609, there was a final official expulsion of the Moors in Europe. This is when they were conquered and taken captives as slaves, and most of the Moors that fled Europe found refuge in North and West Africa. So now this segment brings me into the phenotype of what these people actually look like, right? So from the English dictionary, it reads Negro, black Moor black inhabitants of Nigeria in Africa. The word Moor is derived from the word Moorish, which means dark skinned. Moors that ruled Spain were barbers. When Elizabeth I of England died in 1603 unmarried, James moved to London and was crowned King James I of England and first of the Stuart King of the combined crowns of England and Scotland. Married King Charles Stuart II, Black King of England. That's referenced by this guy. And it reads the word Stuart comes from an old Nordish root, swarf, which means black. Is a name. Stort is the same word as storty, which means black in Old English. There was once a storied line of kings in England. The name of the founding ancestor was Stort, which means black man. In this post, we feature the original painting of the Stort kings of England and Scotland. King Charles II, also lovingly known as the Black Boy of England and his subjects. He is commemorated in the celebrated name of Black Boy Inn, found all over the British Isle. King Charles II was a black man. Many of his surviving paintings falsely depict him as a so-called white man, in clear contradiction to the famous description of the Jolly King. However, in the picture posted immediately below, one can see one of the contemporary paintings of King Charles II, Mary Black Boy of England. This picture invites all to decide that King Charles Stuart II would have been called the Black Boy. As you can vividly see, Black Boy Inn is actually a hotel in, I believe, in Wales. Yeah, just like it was alluding to in the chapter that we read. Um, yep. Okay. So this brings us to the next segment, which is a book called When Scotland Was Jewish by Elizabeth Caldwell and Donald N. Yates. Okay. And it reads The Forgotten Monarchy of Scotland, Prince Michael Stuart. The author of the Scottish History of H.R.H. Prince Michael Stuart of Albany, head of the Scottish Royal Horse of Stuart, descendant of the Stuart pretenders. And it reads, the second one says, the Stuart family material line in France was descended from the tribe of Judah. He believes the family is of the Davidic ancestry that is from the Jewish King David. The next one says H.R.H. Michael Stuart, and he states, from Tamar and Echad were descended most of the royal lines of Ireland, through which all the kings of Scots trace their succession from biblical kings of Judah. The next segment reads, it is known that the people descend from the ancient biblical Hebrews settled in all these places, in Spain and in Rome, in Roman times, in Bulgaria and Sicilia during the Hellenic and the Byzantine times. Stuart and Caldwell says the Stuart donors scores match those that Caldwell donors in the second wave of the immigration. So we now move to the discussion. Those Jews or crypto Jews who joined their choral linguistics in Scotland after 1300. And it reads, in America, it occurs in most ethnic population, including African Americans and Hispanics, due to the admixture. So this is where the Stuart bloodline still lives on, in the African American and the Hispanic population. The next page is Douglas. So Douglas is one of the kings of Scotland, and it says the name Douglas means dark stranger. In the Gaelic, and many have originated from the Mediterranean complexions of the family's founders. The Black Douglas, so named for his dark coloring, from 1300 to 1455 AD. Okay. Next we have Campbell. The Campbell sept includes several with the apparent Hebrew connection. Okay, the Gaelic word Jubine means black or dark. Such designation probably referred to as a dark skin or complexion, as early portraits of the Campbells show them to have olive and tawny skin and dark hair and eyes. Awesome. So that brings me to the conclusion of this book. Next, I would like to further emphasize what King James looked at that time. So as we can see, this is the man who authorized the translation of the Holy Bible during 1611. And you can see at the bottom of this image, it says Jacob, like Yakub, right? I wonder why it says that. Of Scotland, King James, I believe the 6th, right, of Scotland. Okay, as you can see right here, Scots. Okay, and this is what he looked like. Apparently, he's not the one that you see on your Google. And yeah, there you have it. So next, this brings me to another segment, another article that I archived, which reads The Wild Man and the Moors, Germany 1400. Series of scenes, wild men attacking Moors in castle, wild men fighting with lion and dragon and unicorn, and wild men carrying food to wild women with 2 children seated at the foot of rocks. Stylized trees plant rocks and stylized trees plant rocks, pinkish red backgrounds covered with roses in 2 shades in a pinkish red, frames in diamond lattice formed by the links of chains, blue, darker blue, and white in lower tapestry, right half in shielded, divided horizontally, upper half yellow with 2 red roses with blue contours. So it's going to show you the description of this imagery, right? So this is a visual depiction of what that war looked when the wild men were attacking the Moors. And this reads over here. This interesting 14th century tapestry captures the events of the European migration period when the Gauls, the Celts, and the Black Moors of Europe, a single African people, lost their efforts in defending their villages, towns, and way of life in Italy, Spain, England, France, and Germany to the Italic, Franco-German, and Slavic people who replaced them and at that time attacked with rocks and clubs. It is a surprise to see that it was Moors. Notice their headbands. You see their headbands? There we go. Their headbands, who were portrayed as the first Starburgs and bore the royal names. So these were the kings during that time, the 14th century. Here we go. As you can see, and much emphasized and zoomed in metric. These are the Moors fighting with their arrows, right? You can see them in the castles against the wild man. As you can tell, feet of claws and stuff. Cavemen, ESAU, EDOM. You can see the rivalry, right, that was happening during that time, trying to defend their homes. Obviously, dark-skinned people. Okay, and this brings me to our last to least segments of this class, and it's called the whitewashing of history, aka iconoclast, which means image destroyer. That's all it means, just image destroyer, right? It's a Greek word, right? It goes back to iconoclastics. Okay, for example, the fake Hannibal, as alluded earlier, after going through the source documents and the correlation of history and geographical landmark that showed Hannibal, and also testimonial witnesses that had further confirmed that Hannibal was not a European or Caucasian individual. Okay, so this is what you see on your modern day Google. If you type up Hannibal, you see this false depiction. Okay, and the same thing they did with the Messiah, right? False depiction. The biblical proof for this is in 1 Maccabees chapter 3, verse 48. And it said, and laid open the book of the law, wherein the heathen had sought to paint the likeness of their image. So we can see that being executed here during the Renaissance period when the Caucasians came out. Those wild men that were attacking the Moors conquered the Moors and started whitewashing all the paintings of their history, right? Okay. During like the late 1400s, early 1500s, all this stuff was happening. So you can see more images here, right? You see that's the fake Caesar Borgia, aka the Antichrist, and the Messiah is on the back right there, right? Cool. And these people are Edomites, son of Satan. And with that being said, this is a cool article that I found. And this is the Pope bowing down to a black Madonna, aka Mary, I believe so. And yeah, you can see the image purely as dark as charcoal. And it reads right here: all knowledgeable blacks must have mused at one time or another. Church leaders must surely know that the Hebrews were black people, thus Yahushua was black, so can they in good conscience allow them to be depicted as white? Because they're the devil. The reason for that are, of course, complicated and racist, but here is how the Pope deal with it in private. German Pope Benedict and Italian Francis I prayed to a black Madonna in the Vatican Chapel 2013. Yep, look at these two devils, okay? And next, we have more evidence to prove that claim. Nope, you can't make it up. My next witness. And there you have it. You heard it from the devil himself. According to the Bible, the devil is the Caucasian man, woman, and child. And yeah, we have more biblical proof to substantiate the videos you just watched. And it reads in Acts chapter 13, verse 1, the church at Antioch, there were prophets and teachers, Barnabas, Simeon, called Niger, Lucius of Cyrene, Manaen, who had brought up with Herod the Tetrarch, and Saul. So the word, some people can say that means Niger. Okay, according to the blue letter, let's see the pronunciation of that actual word being uttered.
Strong's G 3526. Niger. Niger.
Uh-oh. You've been lied to. So that brings me to my closing statement, right? So in John chapter 8, verse 31 to 32 reads, then Yahushua HaMashiach to those Jews which believed on him, if you continue in my word, then are you my disciples indeed, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. With that being said, I would like to close out this with a big shalom. I hope everybody was edified, especially the 12 tribes and the elect scattered throughout the diaspora. Till next time, okay?